Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Unfound Now, the monthly series in which I, Ed Dentzel, host of Unfound, have an opportunity to publicize, analyze, critique the investigation, etc., a recent disappearance, a disappearance that has just happened within the last couple of months. And for this month, the end of August, beginning of September of 2024, I'm taking a look at the disappearance of William Arellano. Now, you may see some places where his last name is spelled with an A at the end, and I did check into this, and it actually ends with an O, so it is Orellano. You may see some news reports where there's an A at the end. That is incorrect. In contrast, if you go to Web Sleuths, that is the correct spelling, if you're wondering. He went missing, it seems, late night of July 20th of 2024 in Riverside, California. He was 34 years old. He actually lives in Upland, California, and we will be taking a look at a map for this disappearance in the middle of this video. And also, he was dating the same woman for the last 4 years and has a son with her. And we'll get into the specifics of the disappearance here in a moment. As you are watching, I hope you will consider giving this video a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to this channel. Share it with others if you think they will find it interesting. And also, if you'd like to support, one more way you can support what we do here at Unfound, it is hitting the join button below, and you get some things that other people do not get. If you have been a follower of Unfound now for the past over 4 years, you know, for each of these videos, I do this much differently than everyone else, whether it's a disappearance that's 30 years old or just a month old. I like to have some learning points because we are all about education here at Unfound. I'm learning, you're learning, and I believe that's the way we can bring an end to these unsolved disappearances. So the learning points for this particular episode are, number one, don't let me be misunderstood. Number two, creativity cuts both ways. And number three, past performance sometimes is a predictor of future results. So now I'm going to read an article. There are many. Although none of them are recent, most of the articles that have been written about William's disappearance were written back in July. There's hardly anything here in August of 2024 that has been written about his disappearance, although there have been some entries on Web Sleuths, but nothing that I would say was more revealing than the stories that are already out there. And by the way, I'm doing this on the road in Orlando, so if you hear any weird background noises or anything, that is the reason I'm doing this in my Airbnb. So here's an article. Like I said, there were several written within about the first 10 days going to like the end of July. I've just picked out one, and then I gleaned and copied over a few more pieces of information from a couple other articles to make sure we have a decent understanding. But as far as I can tell, there are no new facts regarding William's disappearance since July, and I'm recording this on August 31st of 2024. So here's the article. The search continues for a missing Riverside County father of 5 whose abandoned car was found more than 10 days ago. I don't know how people can just vanish, said Casey Silvis, the longtime girlfriend of William Arellano. He has been missing for 11 days now after his car was found abandoned 35 miles from his Upland home. It was crashed into a light pole near Barton Street and Santa Ynez Way in Riverside. We're going to take a look at that map here in a bit. Loved ones are distraught as there's been no sign of him since, not reaching out to them or any of his closest friends or family members, even his mother, who he talks to multiple times a day. It's the hardest thing a mother could go through, said Cynthia Hernandez, William's mother, especially when you have such a close relationship. It's been hard. They've been checking hospitals and searching for him extensively, posting flyers all over the Inland Empire, including parts of Moreno Valley. His phone and work uniform were both found inside the car, so he hasn't been active on social media, and they can't track his location. His kids are missing him. They're devastated without him, Silvis said. The baby keeps looking outside the door, calling his dad. If you're wondering about the uniform, he was a security guard. At this time, the Upland Police Department say that there are no indications of foul play, even though it is a seemingly strange disappearance. I'll come back to that later. As their own search continues, they're looking into Orellano's phone and financial records. They checked the last phone number that called him before he disappeared, but quickly hit a dead end. He's not gang affiliated, Silvis said. He's not a criminal. All his tattoos are religious tattoos. They worry that he may have wandered off following the crash, but the question as to where he could have wandered remains. I just hope and pray that if someone were to see him, they would reach out to him, Hernandez pleaded. Investigators say that Orellano, once again in this article it's mistyped, Orellano, is about 5'7", has a thin build with distinct tattoos on his head and neck. Anyone who may know more is urged to contact detectives at 909-946-7624. Here is some additional information. Silvis said she received a missed call from Orellano around 3:52 a.m. on July 21st. It wasn't until she tried to contact him and got no answer that she began to worry. Eventually, she contacted authorities who saw that his vehicle had been towed following a collision in Riverside, in the city of Riverside. And it's going to mention this in a little bit. He doesn't know anybody in Riverside. He doesn't have any family in Riverside. The area that he was at was so isolated, we don't know how his car got there, she said. And so, gleaning from another article, it says that on July 20th, that day, he was at his uncle's home in Paris, California, P-E-R-R-I-S, not P-A-R-I-S, P-E-R-R-I-S, which is south, considerably south from where the wreck was. And there was this missed call from Orellano around 3:52 a.m. on July 21st. And his vehicle was involved in a collision along Barton Street at Santa Ynez Way early morning of July 21st. The car hit a pole. Then later, about 5 a.m., it was hit by another vehicle. I'm going to show you this on the map. The car was abandoned when the other vehicle hit it, so there was William was not in his car when it got hit. His cell phone and his security uniform were found in the car, and it's unclear he was on that street, and I'm going to go through that on the map part of this video right now. Okay, let's take a look at this map for the disappearance of William Arellano. Going to come down here, zoom in. This is this little piece. This is just, that's all it is. Santa Ynez Way is what, 100 feet long maybe, right here. And this is Barton Street. So this is the nearest intersection to where William's car was found wrecked. And yes, you heard it correctly, that somebody was going along the street and hit his car, which was still in the street. I don't know how that happened, but I guess that's what happened. And you'll see that Barton Street is pretty darn straight here. Now, which way was William going? I don't know. Just don't know. But let me throw in here some other locations, and we'll come back to this. So he was in Paris, P-E-R-R-I-S. Takes a little time due to the Wi-Fi that I'm using here in this Airbnb. So here we go. And what I also want to put in here is where he should have been going, and that is Upland, California. Just take a moment. There you go. Now, what we can see here is there seemingly would have been no reason if he was going from Paris up here. I'll zoom it out once more. If he's going from Paris and he was heading home to Upland, there's no reason for him to be on what we would call a surface street of Santa Ynez Way. No reason. Unless, and we'll get into that in the second part, the next part of this video, maybe he had a very good reason to not want to be on the highway, because it's a very straight way to get from Paris to Upland, and that is staying on the highway. Whatever highway this is. Come up here, go over here, and then go up this way. Instead, he was on the surface street of St. Ynez Way right there. Difficult to understand. I think some of you will maybe think, well, that means somebody else was driving his car. I think there's another very good explanation. Now, what is going to be revealed later that I will just reveal right now is that 2 months before this disappearance happened, William was caught drinking and driving in Corona, California. Right there. So, all in this location, which I don't think should surprise us. We all have our lives. We only go so far from home. We have this pattern. So we shouldn't be too surprised by this. What was he doing over in Corona when he got caught drinking and driving? I don't know. But all I can see in the articles is that nobody could figure out a reason that he would have been over here, where the disappearance, where his car was found smashed up against the pole. Nobody seemingly knows. And I'll get into that later. So he started his day down in Paris, Perris, California. Seemingly, everybody thought he was going to be going back to Upland, where he lived. His car was found right there on a surface street, where there's no reason to be over here if you're driving up here, seemingly. Now let's go back down and take a look at this location again. We'll zoom in on it. This reminds me so much, except there's no water. This reminds me so much of Caleb Harris's disappearance. Kind of the same type of situation where you look at it and except for the water, doesn't seem like a guy or a woman could go missing in very close proximity. Of course, we found out that was not true. Caleb was found less than 1,000 feet from where he lived. So should we be open to that with Williams? Well, what I see over here, I don't know how old this the satellite view is. See a lot of construction here. Not sure when it was done, but it's right there. Very well. On the other hand, could have run. Did he run it? Did he know somebody in this complex? Maybe. And is that person sheltering him this whole time, or did William die due to a car, an injury from his car wreck, and one of his friends in this area covered it up? Excuse me. Wow. I guess it's possible. But being that I see all of this kind of empty area over to the east, I don't know how much it was allowed to be searched, and then I see this little stream over here. Looks like it might go under this road, Van Buren Boulevard. Kind of reminds me of the Van Buren boys from an episode of Seinfeld. Or maybe that's not. Looks like there is like a little stream there. Maybe it's not much of anything if it's not raining. But maybe it's something. Who knows what situation, condition it was in when the car wreck happened. But as we've learned with Bo Man, we could have houses and apartments and business buildings for miles and miles and miles, and it seems people could still disappear within all of that. So, something went wrong on the street. Something went wrong, and his car went into this pole. I don't know what pole it is. We can go down there and take a look at this, but I mean, there's all sorts of poles along the street. Who knows which one it is? And I'm not even sure that it matters. You see over here to the east, if you're drinking and driving, let's say, and you wreck your car, which way are you going to see 2022? So let me go back here a little bit. 2023. So this would have been, which way are you going to run? Are you going to run into the apartment complex, or are you going to run into what looks like a field over here? Asking all of you. I don't drink, so it's impossible for me to say. So that is the map. Doesn't give us a lot, just like seemingly Caleb Harris's didn't. He was still found within 1,000 feet. And I'm going to go with something similar. I think that William, unfortunately, is deceased. I think he will be found within a mile of this location. So let's get back to those learning points so we can all get educated a little bit more on disappearances.
Okay, the learning points for this Unfound Now episode concerning the disappearance of William Arellano. Number one, don't let me be misunderstood. It comes from a song from the 1960s by the Animals, although I think that was somebody else did it first, and then they covered it, and then they made it popular. Anyway, what I mean by this is myself and none of you should misunderstand this type of disappearance, where we have a wrecked car and the person who wrecked it, the owner of the car, is nowhere around. You should know this is a very, very common type of disappearance. Very common. In fact, I would urge you to go to Google right now, or maybe after this video, and just do a search. Car abandoned after wreck. Do a Google search just for that. You don't have to put it, or maybe put it in quotes, whatever. Car abandoned after wreck. And find how much that happens. Quite a bit. Several times every day in the United States. Of course, we have 330 million people here, so that would make sense. This is not a unique type of disappearance. Now, is it unique that William is missing for a month and about 10 or 11 days? Yes, but you should know this is happening all the time, and some of these people are found. Yeah, they ran away and didn't want to get caught because it was a DUI, and eventually they're found at their home or someplace, and they get charged with something. And then others are found not too far away, and they suffered some sort of injury, or maybe the reason they wrecked is because they had a heart attack and they crawled away from the car and they're in the bushes or something. That happens too. All sorts of types. And the thing about this type of disappearance, it seems like it can happen to anybody. It can happen to a 16-year-old new driver the whole way up to 80-year-olds. It's my perception. Once again, do this. Google search it for yourself. Very common type. What the misunderstood part, another misunderstood part about this, though, is too many times, too many people who should know better, and, maybe people who shouldn't know better, like the general public, too often they default to foul play. And I'm here to tell you, rarely is this type of disappearance, wrecked car, person is not there, the owner of the car,
rarely is it foul play. Not saying it doesn't happen. It certainly does. But when you hear about this type of disappearance or read about it through Google, if you're looking at news, you should default to the owner of the car was driving the car, wrecked, ran off for some reason. Maybe the person didn't even know what he or she was doing, maybe due to being on drugs or a head injury or something like that. But you should not think foul play. The person was run off the road and then thrown into another car, or somebody else wrecked the car for some reason, then took off. These kinds of instances are so rare. I don't even know if they're statistically significant. So we need to keep that in mind. I'm just telling you, please keep this in mind. So when investigators show up to this kind of situation, and I think at least investigators, a police officer, something probably gets it right in this situation. Other types of disappearances they get wrong. But investigators should start from the belief that the owner wrecked the car until evidence shows otherwise. And what I mean by evidence, no, the person isn't picking up his phone, or that the phone and the wallet and other things are left behind. Those are not signs of foul play. Those are just facts. Foul play would be if there's blood like in the back seat, or there's signs that there was more than one person in the car, or there's signs that somebody else was driving the car other than the owner. Of course, we could get into maybe a 17-year-old's driving his parents' vehicle and same thing happens. Then I guess it's not technically the owner. Then we could say the person who's is supposed to be driving the car is the person who wrecked the car. So you should go from a standpoint of it's probably somebody ran off after getting into a wreck and didn't want to get caught at the scene. And then, of course, as an investigator, you should be looking for, just keep your eyes peeled. You never know what you're going to run into. But statistically, 99-point-something% of the time, there's no foul play involved in this. Now, there's crimes, drinking and driving, or driving while high, or speeding, and I think a lot of times also these types of disappearances have something to do with people without driver's licenses and everything, and we're going to get into that with William here before we're done. So don't misunderstand these types of disappearances, okay? Do not. I think that maybe another reason that people, both within true crime, who should know better, and outside of true crime get it wrong, is because this kind of disappearance hits people in an area they don't like to talk about. I'm not a drinker. I've never drank and drove, however you say it. If you don't drink, you can't drink and drive. If you don't do drugs, you can't drive while high. That's me. Most people are not Ed Densel. Most people do have a few drinks. And I'm inclined to believe if you have been a steady drinker, not an alcoholic or anything like that, but like to go out with friends, have some martinis, some cosmopolitans, or whatever. In your life, probably at least once, you shouldn't have been driving, and you did. And somehow you made it home. You didn't get hurt. You didn't wreck the car. You didn't kill anybody. Fortunately. So I think as a teetotaler, I look at the rest of you, and I just kind of what comes to mind is, do a lot of people get this wrong, and do they not see these disappearances for what they are because they see that wrecked car and start thinking, well, that could have been me that night I went out and had too many drinks? I wonder. Now, as far as Unfound goes, we've covered quite a few like this, both Unfound Now and the regular podcast, Unfound. Allow me to just name some of those. Of course, Daniel Villarreal, he was eventually found, wrecked his car twice, was eventually found deceased. We had Brianna Maitland, very well-known disappearance, at least in the eastern United States. Her car was backed into an abandoned house. She is still missing many, many years later.
Of course, the guest that I had on thinks with no doubt that there was foul play. I could not disagree more. No signs of foul play for Brianna's disappearance. Same way with Maura Murray, kind of in the same area of the United States. A lot of people think that foul play occurred there. Well, at least she wrecked her car, but then somebody picked her up or something that had ill intentions. Like I said, I'm not saying it's never happened in the history of the United States, but it is so rare that without there being even something that seems out of place, it's not worth considering. And I would say, both with Brianna and Maura's disappearances, there's nothing out of place. We, of course, have Jason Landry, an Unfound Now episode that became a podcast episode. He is still missing. And in fact, in some ways, it's very much like William's disappearance here. And then Caitlin Rose Case, driving from Louisiana to Colorado for a job. Somewhere something went wrong, and her car was eventually found wrecked. And then she was found not too far from her car, as I predicted would be the situation, but it took a while. And I realized some people still think that there was foul play. The way I read it, there was no foul play. I don't know what was going on with Caitlin, but I certainly do not believe that foul play occurred, and there are no facts to support that at least publicly. So a lot of people get this type of disappearance wrong over and over and over again, though. When these disappearances like these are solved, it's not foul play. Keep that in mind regarding Williams. So let's move on to learning point number 2. Number 2, creativity cuts both ways. What do I mean by this? It kind of goes along with point number 1. My estimation would be that too many people within the true crime community look at a disappearance like this, and many people outside the true crime community, people who maybe don't listen to podcasts, don't watch YouTube, true crime YouTube channels, anything like that, and they let their creativity, their very creative minds go in all sorts of directions. And that's how, in my opinion, you get to a situation where people all over the spectrum start thinking this kind of disappearance is foul play. And so it's way too creative compared to the statistics for this kind of disappearance. But when it comes to the other side of creativity, when it comes to the searching side, it's amazing that history has shown us that people, when they go missing, if they're running off, if they've been injured or high or drunk or something, they find places, let's just be straight about this, to die that don't see, you would not, there's no way to logically get there, is what I'm saying. But too often, there is a lack of creativity when the topic of searches are concerned. So everybody, when it comes to the actual disappearance, man, their minds just run the whole range of a disappearance like this. And of course, a lot of different disappearances, types of disappearances. But they, it could be foul play and this, that. I mean, it's so prevalent that even my friend Jeff Wise, who does the Flight 370 disappearance channel on YouTube, I mean, he just had an episode recently talk about these people who think that Flight 370 got taken by a UFO. So that's kind of what I mean. People's ideas and creativity and theories just all over the place. But when it comes to actual searches, suddenly everybody's like, well, he wouldn't have done that. She wouldn't have done that. No way they would do that. Suddenly everybody their thinking becomes very limited. It's very interesting to me regarding this. And whereas even within Unfound's own history of disappearances, or even, of course, Unfound Now, this series, we have examples where we really, really, really should
keep our minds very, very open. This is one of those reasons that really I try not to read missing people's minds in the Unfound episodes. When I'm talking to a family member, or a friend, whoever it may be, it's really hard to predict what is in missing persons' heads when they go missing, even if it's foul play, even if they're getting lured, even if whatever. And so we shouldn't then be surprised, and this is one of the reasons, because their behaviors are totally unpredictable. And so when you look at, maybe some of these names will ring a bell. I'll go through them. Caleb Harris, Esther Westenbarger, Bo Mann, Mary Lane Carter. Some of those names ring a bell. They should. All of them, except Esther's, was an Unfound Now episode. Now, we'll just go with the most recent one, of course, Caleb Harris. A lot of people think, or thought it was foul play. Instead, he's found in a sewer not far away from where he lived. Now, I would admit that I did not predict that he would be found in a sewer, but I did put it out there that he's probably disappeared within close proximity. He will be found in close proximity. Might have gone over to the water, kind of had to calculate it out how long it would take him to walk to the bay nearby, and that's about the time that his phone seemingly went off. I was thinking, well, might be in the water or something, but I always believed he's going to be found pretty close. I was right. Didn't know there was a sewer there, so I don't know how I could have predicted that. At least the way it's built there, the way it's engineered in that area, I didn't know that. Had I known that, maybe I might have been able to predict that, but I predicted it's going to be somewhere close. I was right. Bo Mann. Unfortunately, I did not think that he was still alive. A lot of people were suspicious of where he got dropped off, but he was found within a quarter mile of where he got dropped off. And then Mary Lane Carter, who could have predicted that she would drive from Kansas going to Arkansas, and she had going through some issues, and somehow she was able to find an empty container that she could drive into, close the doors, and kill herself through carbon monoxide poisoning inside the container. And we're very fortunate that one of the searchers looking for noticed this, started going, I don't know if it was a man or woman, but started going through his or her head. And because they had the last ping, I think, of where her phone was. They knew she was around that area, and they found her. Not predictable. I mean, somewhat predictable, but not really predictable when you really get to the specifics. Caleb Harris in a sewer. Bo Mann just laying out there in the open in a courtyard of an abandoned building. Who would have thought that? He was there for a year and a half. Mary Lane Carter. Who would have really thought when she went missing she's going to be found inside one of these big shipping containers that you can fit like 2 cars in, and she would find one on her way from Kansas to Arkansas. But with Mary Lane, of course, that one's a suicide. I don't know if the other 2 are suicides, but when people are motivated, they find ways. And so I think people get too creative on the theory end and then not creative enough when it comes to the searching end and where these people could be. So that's what I mean, that creativity cuts both ways. So we need to be thinking about this with William. Moving on to learning point number 3. Number 3, past performance sometimes is a predictor of future results. And I get that line from any investment firm. They're looking at the stock market or whatever else. And what do they tell you? If you're getting money in, don't think that the market's going to continue to do what it's been doing, right? Anybody who's ever been involved in investing is familiar with that saying. Well,
that's not quite true with disappearances. And this is why we spend so much time talking about the people on Unfound, the podcast, getting to know them really, really well. I'm not saying that the disappearances are absolutely 100% predictable, but start talking about them and these things start popping up. Drug use, mental health issues, money problems, relationship problems. These are all predictors that a disappearance could happen in the future, and raises the possibility that these people will go missing more than other people. It raises the probability that they'll go missing compared to the rest of the population that doesn't have these issues. This is a very, very important part of understanding disappearances. We all fall into categories about how we could go missing. And that could, I'm not going to say it could vary from day to day, but it could vary from year to year. You're in a relationship this year, you're in an abusive relationship this year, you get out of it with your life, and then next year you're not in a relationship, well, your probability of going missing has gone down. Whereas if this year you're single and next year you're in an abusive relationship, your probability went up that you're going to go missing. And same way with addiction and all these things. It all is whether it's playing a huge role in your life or not. Well, with William, he got caught driving while intoxicated in May of this year. So about 2 months before he goes missing, he got caught drinking and driving in May in Corona, California. Really not that far away. I mean, Riverside, Upland, Corona, all kind of in a triangle there, not really that far away from each other. And by the way, I've been to all of these cities maybe like 15 years ago or something. And I'm familiar with the general area of California. And, of course, we covered a disappearance from that area, Ashley Kohler, if you remember, on the podcast itself that comes out every Friday. We got caught drinking and driving back in May. Now, the question I have is, how was he able to keep his job as a security guard if he got caught doing that? Or what if we were to find out that he was faking it? You know, security guards generally have to be bonded. They check your background and all these things. Did his employer know that he got caught drinking and driving in May? Because it seems like he still had his job. I wonder. I couldn't find any information on that. But when I hear something like that, now if he's an accountant or something, I don't know how much that's really going to affect your job situation. Certainly might if you're a teacher or a police officer, something like that, truck driver. But security guard too. I think it might. And so I'm open to the idea, was he really going to his job or not? And did they know? And this is why I continue to say this is about people, not circumstances. And a very good example of this, although two examples. Andrea Bowman, although this is not necessarily about Andrea Bowman, it is about her father, Dennis Bowman, of course, her adopted father, Dennis Bowman, who killed her. We now know that. He's gone to jail for it. But what if we had known, of course, this is something that came up with Andrea's biological mother, Kathy Turkanian, when I interviewed her way back in 2016, is that she thought that Dennis Bowman had killed other people. She ended up being right. Dennis Bowman ended up killing a woman in 1980 in the state of Virginia. Well, if that was known as a really, really well-known fact, then certainly it raises the probability that he killed Andrea too. But it wasn't until, 2018 or something, that anybody knew scientifically that Dennis had killed this woman in Virginia, and that's eventually what led to Andrea's remains being found on the Bowman property. This is what I mean. Sometimes past performance is an indicator of future results. Perfect example, even though it doesn't have to do with the missing girl, Andrea. And then we might take a look at a disappearance like Tyler North. That, once again, past performance sometimes is a predictor of future results. And what do I mean by that? Well, Tyler North was murdered. We've known that for a while. But his ex-wife and her boyfriend finally went to jail for his murder. Well, what was Tyler doing? He was divorced from his wife, but he was still getting together with her for sex secretly, and nobody knew about it. And that's exactly what led to him being murdered. He got lured to a location, and the ex-wife and her new boyfriend killed him. So what if we had known before Tyler went missing that he was doing this? Probably there's people in his family would have said, "Hey Tyler, what are you doing?" and could have stopped this. That's not smart. What are you doing? So this is what I mean. These bad decisions, bad people. A person who murders, who is most likely to commit a murder? Somebody who has murdered before and hasn't gotten caught. So this is what I mean by past performance sometimes is a predictor of future results. And how, of course, what it has to do with William, I think it greatly raises the probability that on the night that his car got wrecked, he was drinking and driving again. Now, if he was a teetotaler and wasn't into drugs or anything, we would have no reason to suspect this. If he didn't have this DUI or anything, we would have to think about something else. But being that this is now public record, and I think somebody even posted on Web Sleuths about this is true, that we have to be open to the idea that this is what was going on the night William's car got wrecked. He was in it, and this is what happened. So I will now get to my analysis of this disappearance. My analysis is that I don't think that this disappearance is much different than Caitlin Rose cases like Daniel Villarreal's and many, many others. There's no reason, at least with the public information, now very well could be a month from now, some more public information comes out that could take me and everybody else, or just me, maybe everybody's thinking there was foul play, in a foul play direction. Could be. But at this point, doing this recording on August 31st, I see a guy who had already been drinking and driving once. I think he was drinking and driving again. So then we have to start thinking about, does this guy, this 34-year-old William, have a drinking problem? I think this is where we have to go. I realize DUI, I don't like him. I think everybody that gets caught, fullest extent of the law, if it's jail or whatever else. But I also realize that not everybody that gets caught drinking and driving has a drinking problem. But I think when you have another DUI within 2 months, I mean, if they were separated by 20 years, I think it's different. But separated by 2 months, I think we need to be open to the idea that William had a drinking problem. And he might have already been on thin ice with his job if he wasn't already let go or something like that. He wrecks, and he's drunk, but not so drunk to not understand what he just did. And he knows if he gets caught, there's going to be big trouble for him because he already has one DUI on his record. This is going to probably be jail time and who knows what else. So he has all the reason in the world to run off. Now, do I think he's dead? Hard for me to say. I will tell you, most of the time, these people do end up being dead. Usually because of injuries sustained in the crash. I just don't know if this wreck was bad enough for that. Do I think then that somebody could be hiding him? Is it a possibility? Sure. I can imagine that. That's certainly happened before, but who are we talking about? Who are we talking about? There is a statute of limitations on drinking and driving. What is, I don't know, I'll just take a guess. 5 years? Somebody's going to hide him for 5 years? I mean, what are we talking about? And who would that be? And, William has kids, and how would he stay away, from them and everybody? It's hard to imagine. Also, at least the way I understand the car, there's no signs that other car hit him or that he was, I guess he could have been driven off the road and the other car not touched him. I suppose that's possible. But what are the odds that he just happens to run into a light pole and everything else? There's so many ways to get away from somebody like that, meaning he's not drinking and driving, and somebody just comes up on him for no reason. And that takes me to the other part of this, is that nobody seems to know what he was doing on that street in the first place. I have an idea. He's drinking and driving, and he's not taking the highway home from Paris up to Upland because he doesn't think he can drive highway speeds up to 65, 70 miles an hour and not swerving all over the place and getting into another wreck. So he's driving on the surface streets at a slower speed because he thinks that that'll keep him from wrecking. Well, it didn't. It did not. Now, what happened after this, it goes back to what I said about creativity. I'm inclined to believe that really William is not that far from where the car got wrecked. Who knows what kind of injury he had, or it very well may be, and I'm very sorry to say this, he realized the bad situation he was in, and he took his own life somewhere, and his body just hasn't been found. And then we get into a situation like Caleb Harris or Bo Man, where you just have to think a little more creatively when it comes to the search part. I've looked at the area as you already did the map. You can be the judge of it for yourself, but that is my analysis. Unfortunately, I think that William's going to be found deceased. I don't think there's going to be foul play. I'm going to say that he's going to be found not too far away, a mile in any direction. But what that actually means and where he is, if I knew that, I'd just tell the police where to go. I don't know that. But certainly more searches should be done in that area. And the searches, if they're going to be done, the people going into them can't be thinking, well, he wouldn't have done this, he wouldn't have done that. Anything has to be on the table. So that is this episode of Unfound Now for August of 2024. Thank you for listening. Please give this video a thumbs up. Please share it. Please subscribe to this channel. Consider supporting Unfound by hitting the join button below, or go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. Talk to you next month.